All right, your notes in front of you are called Solving Basic Inequalities. This is from Chapter 3 again, Sections 2 and 3. So we're going to crank through quite a few ideas right now. But again, these are things that you would have learned back in 7th grade. And your essential question today is, how do you solve a one-step inequality? And hopefully you'll be able to answer that here through the 5 problems that we're going to do. So let's take a look at this first problem. And it says to solve and graph, and we have x plus 12 is less than 20. And what we're going to do is we're going to treat this just like we did an equation. I'm going to kind of put a dotted line or solid line, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to isolate that variable. I'm going to get that variable alone. So the opposite of adding 12 would be subtracting 12. So I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. Let me move this out of the way. So the 12s now go away, and I'm left with x, and 20 minus 12 is 8, and I bring down the sign. So x is less than 8. So what do we want to do, remember, on our number line, is we want to put a 0, and we want to put an 8, because those are the numbers we need. Because this is a less than sign, there's no equal sign, so we're going to use an open circle. And less than, numbers less than 8 are like 7, 6, 5, all the way to 0. So we're going to go and point towards 0 and make sure our line looks dark. And we're going to put an arrow on it so it goes on forever. Okay, so that's our solving and graphing. This looks just like last chapter. We just got to be concerned now with the inequality sign, and we'll get more to that when we get to examples 3 through 5. So let's take a look here on example 2. I have a solve and graph, and this time I have 3 less than m minus 5. Now this is a little bit different, because the variable is on the other side. But that won't hurt us. We'll be okay with that. So I'm going to draw a line this time. And we're going to add 5 to both sides. Because again, we have to get that variable alone. We don't really care about other things. We just want to get the variable alone. Now, if the variable is on the right side, leave it on the right side. Okay, so 3 plus 5 is 8. Now, it would seem like we're done. Now, for the people, let's say you got this, but in the back of the book it had the variable on the left side instead of the right side. So what you need to do is, besides switching the locations, so if you bring the variable from the right to the left and the number from left to right, that means you have to flip this over as well. Okay? You can't just flip it without changing that sign over. You've got to change the sign as well. So we got a 0 and an 8. And then what we want to do is, because it has an inequality sign of no equal there, we're going to have an open circle. And because it's greater than 8, those numbers greater than 8 are to the right. So we're going to go this direction. There's like numbers 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we'll go that way. Okay. All right, you'll notice in the middle of your paper I have this word saying rule. So let's write the rule down. Now we've done adding and subtracting, that's easy, but we've got a rule for multiplying. And before we get to the rule, let's talk about what I have right here. I have this inequality that says 2 is greater than 1. Can we all agree that that statement is true? That 2 is greater than 1? But what would happen if I multiplied both sides by -1? If I multiply both sides by -1, I would then write -2 on this side, and 1 times -1 would be -1. And our natural inclination would be just to bring the sign down as it is. Now, if I bring the sign down as it is -2 larger than -1? That's false, isn't it? So we have to do something. If remember, because we're following the property of equality, what we do to one side we do to the other, so it should still be true. Well, what we have to do instead is to take this inequality sign and flip it over. If we flip it over, now it's no longer false. It's now true, because -2 is less than -1. So what we found just by looking at this is defining our rule. And here is our rule. When we multiply or divide by a negative number, it flips the inequality sign over. So when we multiply or divide by a negative number, it flips the inequality sign over. Let me grab a highlighter here. Like a negative number. And we're just talking about multiplying and dividing now, right? We're not talking about adding and subtracting. And we can see what happened, didn't it? And what it does, if you can think about this, is kind of like, let me show you on a number line while some of you are writing the rule down. Let's take the number 0, the number 3, and the number -3. When we multiply a number, like let's take 3, if I multiply 3 times -1, it becomes -3, doesn't it? What that does is multiplying by a negative number sends it all the way over to the other side of the number line, just by doing that. And the same is true for when I divide by -1, because a negative divided by negative is a positive, and that will send it all the way back over here. So we can see, just by using our rules of multiplying and dividing negative numbers, we can see how things would flip over. And if we're flipping over to the other side of the number line, that kind of makes sense why we have to flip over the inequality sign as well. So let's do a few problems, practicing that. Sometimes it'll come up, sometimes it won't. Let's see what we have next here. So we're going to solve and graph 7x is greater than -42. We want to isolate the variables, so let's divide both sides by 7. And on the left here, the 7's go away, and we're just left with an x. On the other side, -42 divided by 7 is still -6. Hasn't changed. It started to be a negative, it stayed a negative. Since it stayed the same, we didn't flip it over, did we? It's going to stay greater than. And we didn't divide by a negative number. We divided by a positive number. So it's going to stay on the number line side it was supposed to be. So what we want to do then is add a 0 and a -6 to our number line. This is an open circle because it's missing an equal sign. No equal sign there. And greater than -6. Numbers larger than -6, like 0 positive numbers. These are found to the right. So we're going to go in that direction. Do a couple more problems. Let's take a look here at a problem. 15 is less than -6a. Again, we have the a on the other side. That doesn't bother us. We just want to still get it alone. So let's divide both sides by -6. Now this time it's going to change it, isn't it? Because we're dividing by a negative number. So let's flip the sign right away because we know that's what's going to happen. The a is left alone. And 15 divided by -6, so it's positive divided by negative, so it's going to stay negative. So it went from positive number to a negative number. And then we're going to simplify 15 and 6. What number goes into both 15 and 6? 3. So 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay? And so we got -5/2. Now again, if you don't like it this direction, you can flip it over. We talked about that before. You can put the a on the left and the -5/2 on the other side, but when you flip it over, you've got to flip the sign over as well. I would accept either of these answers on a test, but just make sure that you flip them. So let's put down a 0. We know that -5/2 is found on the negative side of the number line, so it's going to be over here. It is going to be an open circle because there is no equal sign, and it's less than, so we're going to kind of go to the left. If we kept it the original way, we said, hey, this number is greater than any number a is going to come up with, and so we're going to still going to go to the left either way we look at it. Okay, I have one more to go. Here we go, and this one has a fraction in it. And again, we're going to solve and graph. We have -1/3 x is greater than or equal to 2. Well, I know that the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3/1. And if we multiply by a reciprocal, it'll make things go away. So we're going to multiply this side by 3 as well. Multiply both sides by 3. But I want to get rid of the negative sign. Remember, we talked about this before. So I want to make sure it's -3. Now, multiplying by a negative sign will flip my inequality over from greater than to less than. The 3's will go away, and the negatives will now become positive, so it's just x by itself. And 2 times -3 is -6. And what we're going to do is, let me get this here. We're going to put a 0 on the number line. We're going to add a -6 to the number line. And this is going to be a closed circle because of that equal sign. Circle. And we want numbers less than -6. Those are found over to the left. Numbers less than -6. Okay. That's the end of these notes. If you have any more questions, you can read your textbook.